I'm Romaine Bostic, and as Taylor just mentioned, risk assets under pressure on this Friday. Geopolitics at the center of it all. The U.S. catching some investors by surprise by warning that Russia could take offensive military action against Ukraine as early as next week. We should point out that Russia has repeatedly rejected charges that it plans to invade Ukraine. The U.S. National Security Advisor, Jake Sullivan, he spoke earlier. Listen to what he had to say.
I want to be crystal clear, though. We are not saying that a decision has been taken, a final decision has been taken by President Putin. What we are saying is that we have a sufficient level of concern based on what we are seeing on the ground and what our intelligence analysts have picked up, that we are sending this clear message.
Bloomberg Chief Washington correspondent Anne-Marie Horton on the ground outside of the White House. Within that building, there had been a lot of diplomatic efforts to try to bring this crisis, I guess this tension, to some sort of an end. And now you have Jake Sullivan talking about a potential military response. Is the diplomatic effort over?
Absolutely not. And we are just learning from the White House this hour, Romaine, that President Biden will speak with President Putin tomorrow morning. Now, the president has left for Camp David, so likely that phone call will take place while he's there at Camp David. He's going to be engaging, obviously, with his national security team. And then Interfax, citing the Kremlin over in Russia, also saying that President Putin will have a call Saturday as well with Emmanuel Macron of France. This would be their second conversation, those two, in as little as 2 weeks. So you do see President Putin sitting down with a European leader as well as the American president. We should note this is the first time Putin and Biden will be speaking since December 30th, and you can see the tension escalation has really gathered pace since then.
Is this all to get our attention? I mean, a lot of the commentary that we've read has said that Putin does this because he wants us to listen. Well, we are listening and we are engaged. What then is the end goal?
I think that's a great question because the Kremlin maintains that they do not want to invade Ukraine. We should also point out that domestically, the polls in Russia show that the public, there's very little appetite for a war with Ukraine. And they also, 80% in a recent poll, seek actually stronger ties with the West. President Putin definitely wants talks on security concerns, and he's made that very clear. As of today, they also said that they reject what NATO and the allies have put forward in terms of written responses. They wanted individual country responses. This is something President Vladimir Putin wants. He doesn't want to see a united America, a heavy hand of American diplomacy and foreign policy alongside Europeans. He wants to see a division within these individuals, within these leaders, within these countries. And so far, they've been pretty united. But we should not discount the fact that President Putin does have 130,000 troops on that border. And in 2014, he did annex Crimea. And since 2014, there has been fighting in Ukraine. This has not gone away in the Donbass region, the eastern part of Ukraine.
Now, I know this news is new, the idea that President Biden and Vladimir Putin will be meeting tomorrow. But what do we know about what that conversation might look like?
I imagine that conversation is going to be frank, as the president has described his last conversations with President Putin. And I imagine it's going to be if the United States truly believes that President Putin could invade even before the Olympics end, which is February 20th in Beijing, because there was this talk that he would not want to antagonize Xi Jinping, then this would be a frank conversation on potentially the final off-ramp that could be for President Putin to pull back those troops.
Really appreciate it. Our Bloomberg Washington correspondent, Anne-Marie Horton. And we want to use this opportunity to dig deeper into some more of these geopolitical ramifications. And we're going to do that with Atlantic Council non-resident senior fellow at the Eurasia Center, Ariel Cohen, also an expert on Russia, Eurasia, and the Middle East. Answer some of the questions that Anne-Marie was trying to answer as well for us. The end goal, if it is to get our attention, Putin has our attention of both the Europe allies and, of course, and the U.S. What then do you see as the end goal?
Over the last 30 years, the balance of power in Europe shifted. If you remember 30 years ago when the Soviet Union collapsed, Russia was lying prostrate. It pulled out troops from Eastern Europe, from Germany, Poland, the Baltic states, and NATO expanded. Nature abhors vacuum, so do geopolitics. Today,
go ahead. I'm sorry.
Yes,
go ahead.
Today, Russia built up a considerable military muscle. Ukraine is relatively weak. The leadership in Ukraine is divided. and not very competent. And Russia is pushing to engage Ukraine, which Putin considers it as historic lands that were controlled by the Russian Empire for hundreds of years. And also Russian troops are in Belarus now.
Yeah.
And the leader of Belarus is rolling over and playing possum with Putin. So this is an opportunity for Putin to build his legacy.
Yeah.
When he's thinking about his place in history books, he would be the one who recreated the Russian Empire.
The historical context is important when looking at why Putin would do this. There's also historical context for NATO and the Western allies as to why they would want to stop this from happening. We fought a world war over this. A lot of people died over this. NATO exists over this. Can NATO, can the Western allies muster up the courage to actually fight back against this if they so choose to?
I don't think anybody has appetite to go into Ukraine and fight Russia there, with the exception of Ukrainians. Also, NATO was created in 1948 to contain the Soviet Union after World War II. So NATO did not fight World War II. If it existed, maybe Hitler would not undertake the aggression that, I hate to say it, I hate the Hitler comparison, but the invasion of Georgia in 2008, the Crimea 2014, Syria and whatnot, without Putin meeting at the time resistance from the Obama administration, was encouraging Russia to become more and more aggressive. And that's the fruit of that aggression
we were speaking a little earlier about what a wave of condemnation, those are the words of Jake Sullivan, would look like if Russia were to proceed, and the threat of any potential sanctions. What is the bar for sanctions, and what would they look like? How can investors potentially prepare for such a risk?
Well, we already see that oil is high. Some of the metals that Russia is exporting, such as titanium, will continue to go up. I think a lot of military equipment companies will go up. We are in the beginning of a new round of World War IV. The Cold War, version 2.0. If the Cold War that we fought in the 70s and the 80s and before that was World War III, and the United States won, Russia is a sore loser. Putin's generation, his buddies from the KGB, are the ones who want to bring it on and to teach the West a lesson. They think they succeeded in Vietnam or whatever, and then we succeeded in Afghanistan. They think that our abysmal retreat from Afghanistan was a sign of weakness, and that was an extra trigger why this is happening now.
Yep, that really makes sense when you put it into that context. Talk to us, though, about, and Romaine has been mentioning this, we heard this question posed to Jake Sullivan at the press conference today. Does Putin risk provoking the Chinese if he does this during the Olympics? Who are Putin's allies? Because if China's number one, is Putin automatically in number two in this scenario, even though he's relying in part also on China?
Yes, he does. And I think we saw the big statement in which Moscow and Beijing clearly and loudly stated that they are together opposing the West. And by the West, I don't mean just US and Europe, not just the transatlantic West, but trans-Pacific West with Japan, Australia, possibly India. So the world is being divided in two camps as we speak, as we are watching this history being made in front of our eyes. You know, I published my PhD dissertation called Russian Imperialism as a book. I did not really believe I will see the main issues of that book being played out in front of our eyes. I said, can Russia be a nation state and a democracy or an empire? It is an empire. Putin gave us his answer.
All right. Well, it'll be interesting to see what the next chapter is going to be. Ariel Cohen, Atlantic Council Senior Fellow, giving us a lot of insight into maybe potentially what we can expect, and more importantly, the mindset of Vladimir Putin.
Thank you for watching. Please subscribe to get more content like this.